So it's a great honor to be able to introduce Kongjian Yu, and I thought I might say a few words about his story, his long march, as I like to think of it, because we were talking earlier, and he said, well, basically, if you're going to be a landscape architect, you ought to be a farmer first. And I'm looking here, I see there's an image of a farmer, but, well, I'm not a landscape architect, but I also had an experience in my life a long time ago when I was, as it were, something of a farmer. And after that, he, in 1980, was, I think, in the first class in the forestry university in Beijing, studying landscape architecture, and he was there for both undergraduate and graduate. What did I do? And then after that, he was 5 years a teacher in the same institution, and then came to Harvard and was 3 years at the GSD in Harvard doing, I guess, a doctorate, and then to brief, well, not so brief, almost 2 years in SWA landscape firm on the West Coast, and finally going back to China, where he started immediately his own firm, having the title Turenscape, and that was in 1998, I think, and in 1999 they won the first competition, and this institution has never looked back, and he is extremely active there, and Michael Sorkin, who has this little publishing house called Terreform, has just published a remarkable book, which is a collection of letters that Kongjian Yu wrote to various politicians in the Chinese government, and also in local government, of course, mayors of towns, but also the President of the Republic himself. And it's really a very illuminating book, and I think it's perhaps rather unique that a practicing landscape architect would be so engaged in the task of trying to rescue the country from the depredations of desertification and flooding and well, of course, these are worldwide phenomena, but they're particularly prevalent in China. And so I will not delay this much longer, but I should say that he has received 12 ASLA awards for landscape and 5 WAF Best Landscape Awards, and he has served on the Aga Khan Architecture Award Program. He was elected a member of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences in 2016 and received a Doctor Honoris Causa from Sapienza University in Rome in 2017. And with that, I'm happy to present Kongjian Yu.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor Kenneth Frampton. It's really a great honor for me to be invited to speak in this lecture series. Your book is a Bible for the Chinese students, at least here, for many years. And also, so I really appreciate your work and admire your work. And certainly this time is a great honor to speak about my work, and certainly I will welcome you to as a critique again, as my professor. So the topic I'm going to talk is called deep connections and deep forms. So people might think that our world is more connected mentally and physically than ever. You know, we have Facebook, WeChat, highways, pipelines, but we are not. So all these visible connections, the farmer working with the land, with a very simple tool, but a beautiful landscape. So that's basically I call the deep form. So people might think that we are connected, yeah, because of all these high tech, all this infrastructure, all these pipelines, power lines. But actually we are not. These visible connections are actually murders of those invisible symbiotic relationships between those essential natural and cultural elements and processes. I will quote the beautiful mind, Nasha, the scientist or the mathematicians. There's a dialogue between Nasha and his wife, Alicia. His future will be his wife. I bet you are very popular, with the girls. I don't exactly know what I am required to say in order for me to have intercourse with you. But could we assume that I said all that? I mean, essentially we are talking about fluid exchange, right? So could we go just, straight ahead to go sex? So even love today becomes such a simple process. Forget the whole process. So, and that's the result, that's the result of all these messy results. We have seen, particularly in China, over 10% of the most fertile land in China was taken over by urban development. 80% of Chinese cities are suffering air pollution. Flood, drought. 2/3 of Chinese cities are suffering drought. At the same time, we have flood. Almost all the cities facing flood, annual flood. And 75% of surface water is polluted. 60% of underground water is polluted. And 50% of habitat, wetland particularly, get lost in the past 50 years. Now that's the situation as a landscape architect have to face. That's in China, of course, but certainly in some part of the world also. And conventionally, the conventional solution of single-minded engineering like the following: damming, dikes, pipelines, sewage plant. All these are actually, as I mentioned, murder of many deep relationships between the essential natural and cultural element and process, including water, food, nutrient, lives, and beauty. Now, these visible connections, connecting infrastructure are therefore shallow connections and in shallow forms. And meanwhile, we are making big investment on creating to beautify our city. But more than often, these creations are wasteful and in fake forms. In last 40 years, almost every year, China consumes over half of cement, a third of steel, and a third of coal of the whole world, and build something we call beautiful. So ubiquitous ornamental landscape you can see everywhere in China. Now that's why I call a revolution. I call it Bigfoot revolution versus small, gentrified little feet. So that's a different value, a different aesthetics. Now today I call this aesthetic is the aesthetic of ecology. So we need a kind of infrastructure, the nature-based solutions. So by planning and designing ecological infrastructure to reconnect those interrupted relationships, water, food, nutrient, and beauty. Such solutions result in deep forms that stand in contrast to shallow forms, which has only the superficial perceptual order and lacks the solidity of a coherent process beneath the surface. Here I describe as deep form, the terraces, rice paddy, productive, beautiful, high performance, sustainable, and the other is shallow form or fake form, unsustainable, consumative. That's And the shallow form can be at a larger scale. Now, this whole China's urbanization pattern. 70% of immigrants, 70% of urban population are located in the flood risk area. Now, this happened in the last 40 years. So this is a shallow form of urbanization. So, and the timeless interdependence of human culture and nature has built up the deepest bond between peasants and their farmland. Therefore, the creation of deep forms can be inspired by the wisdom of peasantry. I just talked with Kenneth about farming, how farming become necessarily part of my career. It's because I learned field making, irrigating, fertilizing, growing, and harvesting. Now, these basic skills of farming, because of survival meaning, create deep form. You can see they're beautiful, but they're high performance, functional. For over 20 years, my team at Turenscape and Beijing University have been testing such solutions in over 200 cities and showcased a number of numerous replicable models for healing and transforming our land at various scales. Basically, two levels actions to create deep forms. One is planning to create configurative deep form. The other is design to create transformative. Now, you cannot divide nature with culture, between culture. So you have to transform the landscape. So basically two categories for my practice. So the first category is planning to achieve these configurative deep forms, basically ecological planning, inspired by McHug's Design with Nature, of course, across the scale, from national scale to regional scale. For example, at a national level, every year flood take only actually less than 1% of national land. But we invest hundreds of billions of dollars, try to build walls to protect the city, to protect the land from being flooded. Why do that? Because we try to create those shallow form. So look at, that's the result. So 70% of GDP actually produced in the floodplain. So that's really a shallow form. We built a city in the wrong place at the first hand. So that's the project, the largest project my team did, is to define the line between nature and culture. Try to create a deep configurative form, a boundary between nature and urban development, and eventually develop the idea that what could it be deep form, which mean adaptive to ecological process, particularly flood, desertification, agricultural land, and it come out this idea called foothill strategy. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about this. At the regional scale, Beijing, for example, urban sprawl, 4 times, spread 4 times, and take over everything when the infrastructure goes, when the pipelines goes, when highway goes. We overuse the groundwater, drops 1 meter to 2 meters every year. So all the river in Beijing region you can see dried out. But at the same time, the street got flooded every year, almost every year. In 2012, 79 people died in the car, on the street, and on the river, in the river. So we are in bad, fake form. So we developed this flood security pattern to tell the municipal government to tell to how can we create deep form urban development, integrate with stormwater management, habitat protection, cultural heritage protection, and green bicycle lane, green transportation system. So develop this landscape security pattern, infrastructure, a green infrastructure. And this green infrastructure will lead future urban development. So instead of urban sprawl without any frame, with any restriction, we say landscape will become the frame. This is what James, you guys told, landscape urbanism. So landscape leading the way of urban development. And now this has been done almost 12 years ago, and been partly accepted. At a medium scale, 10 square kilometer size, for example. This is a case we did also about 10 years ago. Instead of conventional way, conventional way is leveling the ground, build infrastructure, lay out all this drainage system, pipes, gray infrastructure. Now we say, why don't protect all this pond system? They've been here for hundreds and thousands of years. So farmers develop this, we call it sponge, the land, the sponge, regulating the monsoon climate. In dry season, they use water to irrigate. In monsoon season, they keep water. So we develop this landscape as infrastructure without pipes. Without drainage pipes, of course. Use landscape as infrastructure to integrate drainage, bicycle, pedestrian, and park system together, and to develop this area. Save a lot of money. 15% of investment can be saved without leveling the ground, without laying pipes, and create infrastructure based on using landscape. That was rendering 10 years ago, and this was built. So the whole city, almost the whole city in Wuhan was flooded a year ago. It's a big flood for the basically urban inundation, urban flood. This town survived because we create this resilient landscape, not depending on the pipelines. And this landscape become a filtrator, become sponge to regulate water, and we don't need water to irrigate the landscape, the trees. Save a lot of money. So this is basically the strategy for planning, create a configurative deep form across the scale, from national scale, regional scale, to urban, to this community, individual city scale. Now I want to spend more time on this. The second strategy is design and engineering to create transformative deep forms. These are typical transformative deep forms. Here you cannot separate culture from nature. So terraces, you don't know where is culture, where is culture. But the culture is dripping over the nature pattern. So it's deep form. It's deep form. And the building, of course, is an Italian in Oviedo, is a building beautiful. You cannot divide. You can separate nature from culture. How can we create an upgraded model of deep form to solve today's problem? The first principle of first approach is make friend with flood. Annual flood damage cost $100 billion US dollars in China every year, and 10 million people affected each year. Yeah. All rivers in China basically been channelized like that, been dammed and channelized in order to protect from being flooded. But that's only make case worse. For 5,000 years, we are fighting against flood by this kind of solution. So we take a nature-based solution, This is a case we did at 2003 in Zhejiang province. The river been channelized, and the mayor get a lot of complaints from the farmers because the farmers, buffalo have no place to drink water. Usually the buffalo go to the creek, to the river to drink water. Now the buffalo have no place to go to swim, to bath, to get water. So he have to call me as a landscape architect to see how can we find a better solution to make this, safe for buffalo, but actually also safe for people and to make beautiful. Certainly, it covers the nature. The process will remove the concrete and it covers the nature. But certainly, that's based on science. So we analyze where actually the water go. There's 10-year flood, 20-year flood, 50-year flood. So actually flood didn't go anywhere. Flood have place to go. So why don't you adapt the flood pattern to create urban development and landscape so that we can have a deep form without wall? So that's before, in 2002, now that's today. Again, transformative. Create a buffer, create a resilient landscape so that we can adapt to this seasonal or monsoon climate. This actually is a dike, and that's an inner lake. So share, people and water share the space. Because monsoon only come for a month, 2 months. Flood can only come maybe for 2 hours. So why bother to build a line between the people and water? So these become a sponge, resilient. This is in my hometown, even more serious flood wall, a big river. So again, we are successful, convince the local mayor, transform it, remove all the concrete, and replace with eco-friendly landscape, terrace it. So terrace landscape, learn from farmer, very little simple cut and fill, create terraces, become friend with water, not against that. So 100-year flood come out actually immediately after the park was built. People get it surprised, the whole park been flooded. But just 2 weeks later, the flood goes, and the land become fertilized, more flourish, more lush vegetation comes in, and when during the dry season, the park become this kind of accessible landscape. So it's a resilient landscape. Make friend with flood, share the space between people and water. The second principle to create deep form is to go productive. As I mentioned, China has 20% of world population, but only have 8% of world arable land, and 10% of which have got lost in the past 30 to 40 years due to urban development. When you fly into Hangzhou, you will see the massive scale of urbanization took over, and you virtually take over all this fertile land. So this case, built in 2003, I want to demonstrate that productive can come back to the city and use the space we have the green space can be productive. So this is the Shenyang Architectural or Jianzhou University, 1 square kilometer in size. So we collect stormwater and use the stormwater to irrigate the field and make the field for rice planting. And put students studying rooms right in the middle of the rice paddy. So that's a water collection pond, this is an irrigation system, this is a classroom. That was the site. It was in March and the president of the campus wanted the school wanted to open the campus in 6 months. So how can you build a campus in 6 months? And he had no budget because he used all the budget for the building. You know, all the Chinese clients want buildings, okay, architects, right? Beautiful. But have no budget for landscape. And he want to make unique, you know, beautiful still. How can we do it? So as I said, the rainwater is free. You know, collect the rainwater and irrigate the land and create a landscape which can be beautiful and no budget. Because all the Chinese farmers know how to cultivate the land. Minimum cost, even cheaper than a loan, right? Than a piece of land. So that's become really a rice paddy farm. And it's really there's a local farmers come in to raise sheep here, you know, goats, sheep, and the students using the space, the professors here, study rooms, and the pass from the library to the classroom, and the user space. Certainly, this is post-agriculture. You know, this is a productive agriculture, but it is urbanized. It's urban. How happy here, professor here, because he can walk on the path, you know, walk on the path to the classroom of the field. But he's happy, you know why? Because he has shoes on, right? If you have bare feet, you will not be happy. Like me, I walk in the farm with bare feet, right? So, and dressed. So that's a new aesthetics. When a population like 40 years ago, only 10% or 20% of population in urban area. Now we have 58% become urbanized. So about 80% of urban population have the root in the farm. So now when they look back the farm, look back the rice paddy, it's a feeling of upgraded, a feeling of a kind of distance but still connected. So the new aesthetics come to the society. You see people, the former farmers come back to visit the rice paddy here. Yeah. And as a student gets involved for rice planting, they have rice planting season, they have harvest season. So it's become a cultural, performative, activities. So that's and even in winter times, we keep patches of rice paddy in the field. Because as I mentioned, I was a farmer. When I was a farmer, my father told me that when you harvest the rice paddy, you better keep patches of rice in the field. You know why? Because if you harvest all, if you cut all the rice, the rats will come to your house. Yeah? But in this case, the animals, the birds, the rats will be kept in the field. So the birds will watch it. There's illegal. They take out these rats. So that's ecology. That's ecology. And certainly you produce food. It become a treasures like token, iconic token for this campus. So that's an experiment, which is 15 years ago. Now we replicate this idea at even larger scale. Here in America, we call it agricultural urbanism, or urban agriculture. Yeah, this is a case in Quzhou, in Zhejiang province. Quzhou is a city during World War II. The American Air Force, supposed to land in the city, but they failed, right? Because of distance to Tokyo to here. But this is a city called the Quzhou city. They have an airport at that time. And that's a site you can see is an abandoned farm. And it's a floodplain also. That's a site. That was a site. An urban development happening surrounding the whole area, but abandoned farm. So we recover the farm and create a flood adaptive landscape, adapt to this river, and also make the landscape productive again. Here, the fields become productive but also urbanized. People can use this space. These are pavilions. We're also inspired by local pavilions for rest, for shade, for farming, but also for urban recreation. You can see the buildings totally surrounding these areas. Floating above this floodplain, you can have these pavilions. So that's the site. Again, we revive agricultural technique, very simple agricultural technique. Create this pond system to regulate water, the dry season and the wet season, and planted and rotated, the crops. That's very simple. Rotating. That's a very ancient wisdom. So you don't have to fertilize the soil because the crops produce fertilizer. So during the season, sunflower season, you can have sunflower, you can canola flower, you can meadows year round. So it's basically farming. You can see 20,000 people attracted every day to this park, particularly during the flower season. And during the social media time, when one flower open, the whole city knows that. So it become a huge festival. Now today you just after 3 years you can see the lush vegetation, the floodplain, the pond collecting water, and this skywalk, and this cities growing surrounding this park, and certainly socially performative. Three yoga teams function here every day. So that's urban agriculture. Now we have several projects, more projects like that. The third value, the third principle is to value the ordinary and the reuse and the recycle. Hundreds of millions of square meters were built in the past 4 decades, and it's almost the same amount of buildings being demolished. Million squares every year. Yeah, like that. So we basically demolish all the old buildings. None exist, almost. Every city become lost memory. So this is the first project I went back to China. It was designed in 1999 when a whole factory got bankrupted. It's in Guangdong near Hong Kong in Zhongshan. It's a shipyard park. 500 people used to work here. So 1995 got bankrupted, built in 1950s. So what should we do? The mayor come to me and say, when I demolish everything, please come to design a fancy park for me. So when I saw the picture, I said, no, we should not demolish. When you demolish, we immediately get, we lose contact with history. So I was able to convince him to stop the process of demolition and design a park based on the existing industrial structures. That's the setting. It's a shipyard, it connects the river, have a lake in the middle. So we keep everything, including the trees. Every trees will be protected, and keep the railroad and the buildings. So that was the site. Now that was built. You can see the change of the city itself, the growing of the city itself. It used to be the very dirty brown field, and the land is so cheap. Now becomes the most expensive area, becomes the living yard of the whole city. That was the site at the beginning in 1999. Now transform it. So transformation adapted the flood. The river is connected to the ocean, so it's have a tide 1.1 meter daily. So these terraces is designed to adapt to the flood, adapt to the tide, and recovering the ecology of the site. At another angle, the two structures are recovered. You can see here the 3 5-star hotels built around this park now. Becomes the most sought after place. Again, here we created the landscape which terracing to the waterfront, make friend with the tide. There's a structure kept, reused, and the 5-star Sheraton Hotel here, another international 5-star hotel. Here is the most expensive apartment building in this area. That was as before. It is today. 2,500 couples take photos every year here, wedding photos. So one of the most favorite wedding place in Pearl River Delta area. That was railroad. This was built, by the way, this is the same kind of railroad. You guys did much fancier, of course. This one, we keep it rustic, messy. Try to create a messiness to get the memory of the site. Now, suddenly becomes attraction for these people, and become a fashion show place, a fashion show. Yeah. So ordinarily, yes. For the first time, you guys know all about Chinese garden. These pavilions, rockeries, these bridges, these corridors, but we create these totally different aesthetics. Now, at the beginning, these were totally being, controversial at that time. There's a huge jury for this project, and only one supports this project. All of them against this, because they said they have nothing to do with the Chinese tradition. Yeah. So it's a new definition of aesthetics, a new aesthetics, or new vernacular, I would say, how can we value the ordinary. This kind of culture happened 50 years ago, 30 years ago. This is also Chinese culture, right? It's a red culture. We have this kind of, so we need something to remember those. So the entrance gate is a red box as entrance to tell the story of the red culture, of the past, I would say, socialism industry as an entrance box. Very simple, but totally a new interpretation of the Chinese culture. At the beginning, people don't understand. They think it's very Western. It's totally Western. But I told them it's totally Chinese. Look at this. Look at three kids. 2 have red scar. In China, to wear a red scar means you behave well. You're good behavior. It's selected. It's an honor to have a red scar. This one have not. You see, he's poor. Very sad. Very sad. Yeah. And it's a color. Chinese color. China red. In America, it's a stock market these days, red. But in China, if red is up. So color have cultural meaning. Color has cultural meaning. So that's the trying to develop the vernacular Chinese or the modern China. The fourth principle is to minimize the intervention, to maximize the return. But in the past 40 years, all the engineering work is to maximize the change. A lot of engineering work, a lot of investment, a lot of concrete. Can we do minimum? So this is the case. We want to demonstrate that if we do minimum, we can still have this provide services, but at the same time we can also make totally different landscape, beautiful. There's other side in coast city, Qinhuangdao, in North China, very dirty but messy ecology. very lush. Yeah. As I said, conventionally where people will remove everything. But here we just keep as it is. Nothing, almost nothing change. No terrain change, no movement of earth, just put one bench, the red bench. The bench is 500 meters long. 500 meters long. And it can fulfill all desires of urban residents. They want to they want to seek safety, seating, lighting, boardwalking. So that's all. That's what we need. We don't have to change nature. So that's built. Just put one bench. The rest of them will keep untouched. Even these, we call the weeds, messy weeds. Nothing have to be changed. In China, we have, the landscape you will see, Steve maybe saw a lot of this kind of, we have ginkgo, you have, pine, beautiful trees, but those are totally, costly, expensive. Here we got anything as it is, messy. But suddenly this place become a favorite place, a safe place for the people you can see. Look at these three ladies. In the morning, in the night, they're still here. A taxi. Outdoor space. Because they feel upgraded. They feel urbanized, modernized. Even though they are still in the messy nature. Now this I saw minimal intervention. You don't have to go to cosmetic surgery, a plastic surgery here, doctor. You just need a bench. You need a little bench. You can turn messiness into beautiful landscape. That's what we did. The seedlings, again, nothing changed. Like this cleanup, just put a bench through it. Now become such an attraction for the resident. By the way, in 2008, Condé Nast Traveler magazine in America named it as one of new 7 wonders of the world. That year, together with this the Olympic Stadium in London and this tower, the Dubai Tower. That was the site. Now that's a messiness, nature, low maintenance, no irrigation, no fertilizer. That was the site. That's in the night. People use it, even in the night, in winter, and in the snow. And nothing changed. Just put one bench. So this is minimized intervention. When you think about China, you will have such meager resources, natural resources. So we have to keep all the natural assets as much as possible, but at the same time still get urbanized or get upgraded or get, we call it civilized. The fifth principle is go porous. Green sponge for a water-resilient city. As I mentioned, over 60% of Chinese cities are suffering urban flood. The conventional solution, of course, to drain away, we learn from all the developed countries, build pipes, drain away all the water. But we are running out of water. So why don't we keep the water instead of drain away the water? So we are inspired again by the farming technique. In Pearl River Delta, James, you did a lot of projects there. Pearl River Delta, like that, porous. Before it was wetland. It was messy wetland. But somehow, 1,000 years ago, people come here to cultivate the land. What's the simplest way? Simplest way is cut and fill. Cut, create a pond for fish, and fill it, create deck for mulberry. So that's why I created this whole culture. So beautiful culture, but also productive, porous. So that's a financial solution can also be solved today's urban problems. So that's urban problem is a project in Harbin in North China, 33 hectares in size, right in the middle of a new town. It was planned as a park, but people don't know how to do this park. So I was called in to design a park like that. So I tried to test then the porous landscape, this sponge, collect water, keep the water, clean the water, and recharge the aquifer. Now that was the site. Urban development already surrounding the whole area. There's a park. So that's on surface. That's my first sketch. Porous, cut and fill, leave the central alone, and put a walk above it. That's a cut, fill, put people above it. Now, the water run into it. So all the storm water run into the park and filtrate it and cleanse it. That's the test, actually. Dirty water, cleaner, and go touch in the middle. The minimum touch, again, leaves the central part open. That's a wetland created. So that's set in the situation. As the first rendering, you can see the boardwalk above, the porous landscape, biodiversity. And you can just use one machine, not two. One machine, you create the landscape. So that's a big benefit of the industrial technology and minimize the import. That was the site again, as today. As porous landscape at periphery, cut and fill, cut, fill, cut, fill, cut, fill, that's fill, cut, fill. So you can see all this filtration porous landscape. That's a couple years later, you will see, you look at it before, and no city here. That's in just two years. So these become a central park, basically, of the whole new town. That's filtrating system, dirty, cleaner, and clean water. That's a fill. A couple years later, or like that. That's what's just built, first year built. So all system will be as porous, sponges. 2 years later. So filled with abundance of vegetations, adapt to this kind of wetland system. Now that's the test. Let's see. So the result come out. My student did a research, a PhD, actually do the observation based on this experiment. And we found that 10% of green space will be enough in this area to solve the urban inundation problem. No pipes. We don't need pipes in this case. Certainly, in the South China, will be maybe 20% maximum. So that can solve the problem of urban inundation, use landscape. And still, at the same time, not just only solve the urban inundation problem, but also you create a habitat and also public space for the people. And the birds, hundreds of birds come to the site in the city. So we also have bird watching pavilions, certainly a little form here. You can see bamboo. We test different materials, stone, rocks, wood, as a pavilion to see, to watch the nature, to experience nature. And this idea can be at very small, at your backyard. So this is my small project in France as a demonstration. How can you create your own sponge at your backyard? That's as a backyard case. You can see this is Mountain Chimon, Shintou Chimon. So that's a small rain garden, cut and fill and create a filtrating system and use rainwater as a reflection pond to create a little art. It's become a fashion, again, a place for fashion show. You can see. Simple, very simple. It's bamboo sticks, painted bamboo, pass. And what about not about water? It's soil, as mentioned. Over 60% of urban soil is polluted. Now that can be very expensive if you want to change it or if you want to clean it. I know in America we have law for soil, the brownfield. We just did a small project in Seattle, the Hinghai Park. We have to seal it. You either change it or you seal it. Otherwise, you're not pass. So in China, even so, we don't have this kind of law. But if you want to clean this kind of landscape, in this case, very alkaline, alkaline urban sewage run into this place, very dirty, of course. Again, we create a porous landscape, porous. Let nature work. Collect storm water, the rainwater. The rainwater is just acid. So when the acid water go together with the alkaline soil, you create chemical reaction, right? Create habitat. Different pH value will have different habitat. So let nature take over. Then actually not so slow. In just 3 years, this kind of landscape will be transformed like that. Porous landscape. Collect stormwater, has huge, very simple cut and fill farming technique, but to create a totally different landscape, habitat. In deep water, shallow water, dry pond, so you have totally adaptive vegetation. The native vegetation created. You see, people actually love this kind of landscape. There was a couple of years ago, the government tried to gentrify this place, tried to create a park along boxes, those, and the people against that. So they write a letter to mayors and to me, and we become a team to fight against gentrification of this site. So now this park basically keep like messiness like this. And this is functional. This is a test to show how the pH value changed, how the soil quality changed, and how the native species increase in this area. The seventh principle is design ecologies for water cleansing. As I mentioned, 75% of the national surface water is polluted like that. Basically, all the lakes are heavily polluted. Certainly, basically nutrient-rich, euphortrates, nutrients, nitrogen, phosphorus, basically fertilizers. Back 30 years ago, farmers would love this because they can use fertilizer. Yeah. But today, because of the industrial idea of buy the chemical fertilizer from the factory and they overuse it in the field and run into the lake and pollute the whole system. So we inspired by farming technique, the wisdom, based on understanding of science and ecology, we create replicable terrace model and design abstracted, quantified, and tested, post-POE, post-operational evaluation test, and become replicable, create a model, create a new language to replicate across a scale, at different scale. Now this is an experiment built in 2009, Shanghai Expo. It's 10 hectares in size, 1 mile long as a site, heavily polluted water and soil. So we want to test this as a cleanser, as a living machine to cleanse water from very dirty, we call it 5th grade, to clean water which can be used with swimmable clean water. Use 1 mile long wetland, subsurface wetland, basically learn from farming, terraces, aquaculture. So that's cascade wall to create oxygen in the water, aeration. Back in the sewage plant, you need the energy to run the aeration. But here, actually use the landscape. We created a 300-meter long cascade wall to create oxygen, and the water become fertilizer and transform it. And plant loves this kind of water. That was a site. Terraces, use farming technology, simple, and grow it. Terracing, grow it. Terracing, but here we want to demonstrate how different plant species can be planted and demonstrate to tell the story that water can be cleansed by plant. So it now become a demonstration to show. So after 1 mile, 1 week, each one drip of water from the source to the end, it takes 1 week. But daily, 1 hectare of wetland can produce 800 cubic meter of clean water like that, and be used in. It was used in Shanghai Expo during the Expo time, and we certainly tested to see how this is functional, so that we can replicate. Now, is functioning very well. For over 5 years, all the data, we get all the data observation. So it's deeply based, this form is deeply based on this ecological process. Certainly you have harvesting, this process of harvesting, no? Basically farming, rice paddy, beans, every productive crops is rotating again here, you rotate. And also you create this biodiversity. 20 species of birds come to the site. And of course, you will integrate with art, with beauty. People, messy, native reeds, plants, integrate with a little bit shape, form here, and become again a loved place in Shanghai. And again, we replicate this experiment at an even larger scale. This just finished last year. Haikou, Hainan Island, a tourism island, but it was notorious for polluting all the rivers like that. These are photo just 2 years ago. So that's the whole river. So we are going to transform the whole river, use this idea of technique, very simple, deep form, remove the concrete first because they didn't help to clean the water. But the engineers just keep trying these things for 20 years. It didn't work. So that's the landscape we are called in to have a different approach. That was basically a garbage site, before, and we terrace it, farm it, create this terraced landscape, and cleans against this air. That's right, yeah. So not only is the urban stormwater runoff, but also sewage. So sewage, very simple treatment of sewage, clean up, also the smell and bacteria. So the rest of them will just fertilizer. So we use this agricultural process, the harvest, to clean up the water, and also at the same time create beauty. People love it every day. Hundreds, thousands of people use this park. As you see, become a recreational park. Certainly, everything is designed. It's a designed ecology. It's a designed system. But even here, you can see how the buffer create water change of color. You see, dirty water, clean water. Even here, you can visible. Certainly, you have place to take a rest. That's the water run into the ocean, being cleansed, and you take place. You have resting place. You have ocean. And also, we observe it. We have all the data to show people that this landscape is performative. You can use it everywhere, basically in China, to replace those expensive sewage plant in some case, not always, but in this, when the water is nutrient rich. And so the green solutions, all these models can be used, integrated for whole river system or for whole city. Now, this is a long river in this city, about 12 kilometers long. That's the case. That's the pre-existing. And so we clean the river, integrating all these techniques I mentioned: stormwater collection, cleansing of soil, and water aeration, and to transform this landscape as is before, as after, before, after, as after. Yeah, certainly you will have these urban furnitures for student use, for people to use, and become such a welcomed green corridor for the whole city, and the catalyst of urban development. And the real estate doubled in just 2 years at both sides of the river. So the whole city can be transformed. We imagine, that's the site of the city called the Liupanshui city in West China. Is an industrial city, 60 square kilometer in size. Is almost 1 million population. Pollution, water, stormwater problem, channelize the concrete river. So the river runs through it. So de-channelize it, remove all the concrete, recover all the tributaries, all the stormwater run system, landscape it, and put patches of wetland, cleanse it. And not enough, we put all the pond system, we call a sponge, across the whole city. So basically you create a sponge city. And that was before. 2 years later, we like that. Fish come back, soften, the river being soft. It was before. 2 years later. The pond system, inspired by farming, is pond system. When the pond link together, it will be functioning as cleaning system, a filtrator, also create a habitat for biodiversity, and also a park. The people use, a lot of people use it every day. Now this has become an international wetland park, named as, even give identities to the whole city. Not only in China, other parts of the world also. Russia, this is in Kazan, Tatarstan, Kazan, a lake polluted, industrial. It was a brownfield. So we get this competition awarded, and they're very quick. Actually, they built this in 1 year. That was our rendering at the beginning. That was a site before. It's the same idea of filtrating system. It was built because it's got a World Cup, football World Cup. Yeah. So that was built. They were built in May. And they told me every day, 50,000 people, visit this site. It's a waterfront. You can see it's a waterfront. Again, this is a terraces filtrating system to clean the water. Again, create an urban waterfront for people to use. All packed. Whole city come to this place. And of course, we have the biodiversity. Man, nature eventually come together. And finally, we can build the deep form in home, integrate with the building, even though very small solution. But imagine in China at least 50 billion square meters of buildings, and 2 billion squares of buildings increase every year. And almost none of them is green building, energy efficient. Almost all of them are wasteful. And it consumes a third of national energy consumption. 30% energy is consumed by all these beautiful buildings, beautiful cities, lighting, every night like that. So how can we do that? How can we do a little bit work and transform it to become green city or green building? So in my own apartment, collect stormwater, solar energy, and turn the balcony into productive balcony, vegetables. And another balcony will be a rain garden on the balcony. It's the 5th floor, so it's a productive vegetables. So I can collect from the roof every year 50 tons, 52 cubic meter of stormwater from the roof, and irrigate, store it, irrigate, and produce 32 kilos of vegetable for salad, for the kitchen. That's another little balcony, stormwater, gardenia. That's my bedroom here. Yeah, it's just open. You feel fragrance, every day, because gardenia, we have all these different osmanthus, all kind of flowers. So you still feel, in the night, you get all this fragrance. And in the bedroom, in the living room also, the wall transformed into a living wall. Now this living wall is different from those living wall in the airport. Right? You saw those living wall are very expensive. You have to nutrient, you have to fertilizer, you have to make a container. Here we make of rocks. All these plants just come out from the rock. You know what? That's my observation. I transformed the building, the apartment in 2009, and they come out of these mosses. Next year, fern come in. Third year, fourth year, the fern take over, become abundant. Now that's today. That's today. Very little maintenance. You just irrigate this wall, use a storm water. And this wall create some gas called the geosmell. Geosmell, the smell, the geosmell. Scientists report says that it can become a cure for depression. If you have this wall, you don't need to take any medicine for depression. Now, but more important, it's cool off the whole apartment. I don't turn on air condition in the summer. And in winter, it evaporate, humidifies the whole building. Because in China, in Beijing, it's very dry in the winter and very hot in summer. So I live with it. Can save a lot of energy. 2,000 kilowatt of energy can be saved without turning air conditioning and humidifier. And so become a learning center. And people come here every month. I have to give a lecture sometimes. Communities, people come here to learn. Now, that's a very small solution. But for big problems, because if all the building can save 1/3 of energy, we can virtually demolish all the big dams in China. We can virtually don't need any hydro powers, because those are very destructive for the overall landscape. So that's a small solution for big change. So to conclude, I would say, facing the unprecedentedly massive scale and unsustainable transformation of the Earth and the devastating ecological degradation, obviously the side effects of industrialization and urbanization, we need to revolutionize our approach to reconfigure the relationship between nature and development, and heal the transformation, and heal the degraded environment and the land. So that I call the big fit revolution. It's a nature-based and performative solution to create deep connections and deep forms. And this image back 2,000 years ago, how the Chinese vision, see the relationship between the land and the people's settlement and the people's construction on the land. So we think like a king. The big, the nation, the globe, but act like a peasant. All the technique, all the technology, all the design, actually a peasant technology. Cut and fill, growing, irrigating, fertilizing, harvesting. That's the most efficient, most cheap solutions. But in order to like a king, you have to convince the king. You have to make a king to believe. That's why Michael Sorkin, I don't know, Michael is, yeah. He asked me to advertise his book. So that's his new book called Letter to Leaders of China. Because the leader is so powerful, like a king. You have to convince them. If you can convince the kings, you can solve the problem. Transform the earthscape, the whole national landscape. But still, you need this skill I call it design ecologies, inspired by farming, by peasantry. Thank you. Thank you for listening. Yeah, thank you.
So I think it's great the way you end with your own apartment. And this wall, which is unbelievable, and the transformation of the wall.
Yeah.
And what is it? The name of the gas that it gives off?
Called geosmell.
Oh, geosmell.
The environmental engineer usually want to get rid of from the water, because it smells dirty. Smells. So when you go to the mountain, you can have this smell. It's a reaction between some bacteria and this water. So there's a rock. It's very simple. The rock actually is a porous limestone. So what I mean is that you work with nature.
Yeah, right.
Thank you for that talk. It was very inspiring. But you end with this comment about convincing the king. And do you think that China is a particular situation? Because once you're able to convince government officials, they function, obviously in an autocratic country, they might function differently than in another setting.
Yeah, two cents. I would say 2 cents. First of all, think like king, which means you have a vision. You need a vision. This can be anywhere. So you take the whole globe as your own territory, your kingdom. I think that's why we have to think big. As a landscape architect, we think global. And I think as the whole territory, national, continental, the globe as a territory. So particularly in this time of climate change or globalization, we have to think a big picture. But how can make this vision to work? Now, in different, how to realize this vision in different systems, we have to work differently. In China, we have this top-down system. So physically, the king is powerful, right? Physically, we have to have this structure, this administrative structure. So if you convince the top leader, you will basically make the work, finished. So your vision become his vision, or his vision, we becomes in the right direction. So that's a top-down system. But here in America, you have this bottom-up system. So the vision is the king, but you have to work with the bottom-up, because the king is voted by these individuals. I did some work here also in America in some small piece like Boston Chinatown Park and Seattle Hingham Park. It's very small, but I find this process totally different. Here you have also public hearing. You have to go to meeting. You have so many. And that's a process to convince the public. I think it's that's a different way. But in China, I think it's a system in some way work with the environment, maybe more efficient. If you have the right idea, if it's a Picard's idea, like the sponge city now become a national movement, because the president loves his idea. So he promotes his idea, and it's a whole machine, the national machine work for creating sponge city at national scale. I think, James, you work with a sponge city also, right? In China, yeah. So I think that the vision is king, but I think it worked differently.
Yes.
The pollution that obviously generated all of these conditions that you were working to solve came from the industrial peak push from China. How much pushback have you gotten from businesses while you're doing that?
Why I'm doing that? For my own business or for their business?
Companies in China resisting that.
Resisting this kind of project?
Yeah, right.
Actually, at the beginning, yes. At the beginning, I started with myself and my wife. We started with ground zero, right? Now we have 600 people in 20 years. So you will see that people actually began snowballing, began to accept this idea, because we have already something built. They experience it, they see it, they visualize it, they can see it. So I think it's basically this is one part of the story for the private company, for business. And also the business, as I told you, the property value doubled, tripled, in 2 years, in 3 years, because of this kind of project. So they are convinced. Secondly, in China, the most of my project is actually paid by the government. So it's a municipal project. It's a civic project. So that's why if the mayors, you convince the mayor likes this, you makes work done. Yeah, in 2 cases. But which also means that the mayor gradually pick up these ideas. Say, You know, in China, as soon as you have a successful project, exposing media, the mayors come to visit. And particularly also in my case, I speak to Mayors Forum each year. You know, in China, we have Mayors Forum, say training mayors. Because mayor change every 4 years, you know, you have to keep training, you know, keep training. So I give talk every year, like maybe 20, 30 lectures to Mayors Forum, sometimes 200 mayors altogether. Now that's very efficient to transform. that's I think fun. So you show them examples, they get idea, yeah.
Over there, yes, at the end.
And besides, they're inexpensive. You know, besides, they're cheap to build.
Thank you for the lecture, Dr. Yu. I'm just curious about like implementation of feng shui, whether it has become part of your design philosophy. Because you mentioned earlier you had experienced the Cultural Revolution, and they kind of hinder superstitious, like through old as a factor of it. Like, can you talk more about it?
Can you make it a bit clearer? It's hard to hear you. Can you stand up?
The implementation of feng shui, whether become your part of design philosophy.
Feng shui, okay, that's another topic. But but I'm very interested at the beginning. In my early career, I have a book actually on feng shui. So basically geomancy in English.
Yeah.
The Devon, you know,
Yeah.
find a location.
Yeah.
Indians did, you know, the American Indian also have same idea of finding a location which have good feng shui. So feng shui is actually very simple. You know, it just for survive, a best location, adapt to the nature. You know, good view. Good view means you have prospect and you have refuge. You know, there's a theory by the English writer called Appleton. He had a theory called prospect and refuge. So you hide yourself and can see other people. So that's good feng shui, basically. So it's evolved based on, you know, you feel secure, safe. Yeah. And the practitioners in Hong Kong, they have very complicated feng shui practice, which I really I doubt about this necessarily. But to me, feng shui is an early version of landscape practice. Okay, sighting, find the best location, avoid any disaster, to get the most benefit from nature. Yeah.
There was another question there.
Yes. Hi. Hello. Thank you for such an interesting lecture. It was very inspiring. I had what you named, and I would like also if you could expand a little bit, the idea of urbanization, and so how the villagers were asking for that urbanization, and then you made, for example, in your One Bench project, right? That was the implementation of urbanization. So if you could expand on that a little bit, I will be interested in hearing a little bit more of that. And also the cultural aspect from, in this case, China, by using the pond or the farmer's culture into creating a new landscape. Because, for example, if we look now at New York's future plan and how they look into climate, it's more a war on climate, as in we need to defend ourselves from that climate. But this is a whole different culture, and it changed. So if you could expand a little bit on those two concepts.
Okay, yeah. Well, the first question is about how the red bench can make people feel urbanized or feel upgraded or feel gentrified or feel get identity or something, right? I think that's a whole story about, you know, the balance between ecology and art, or ecology and human mark, right? Human become human because they want to put marks, right? They want to create their own identity. Even tigers want to put their own identity, right? Scratch the tree, right? So I think that's necessary. People want to, but the thing is that how much is necessary, how much is needed to put your mark on the landscape so that you create your own identity. So a piece of art, I think that's enough. Maybe, yeah? You don't have to transform the whole landscape. And And that's why the Chinese rural villages, farmers, they wanted to be, you know, upgraded, become urbanized. They're looking for this, you know, the high, yeah. So that's I think, so it's a little piece of red bench, modern contemporary design will, you know, minimize the impact of nature, but also maximize the people's, you know, feeling of put their marks on the landscape. The second question I would say about the culture is a cultural cultural transition or something. How you basically culture is ecology. I would say culture and ecology is the same thing. To me, the one definition of culture is ways of adaptation to natural environment. That's why you create diversity of culture. You have dry land, you create dry land culture. In my country, in Southeast Asia, Kenneth just discussed, we have this aquaculture, you know, it's a monsoon climate, rice paddy. So in order to grow rice, for survival, you need to terrace the land. Well, back in England, in your country, well, you don't need a terrace because you have very mild climate, right? You pastoral landscape, you just raise cattle. So you create total different cultural approach to the adaptation, to adapt to the landscape. Well, climate will change this. If too much rain fall into England, I think you need to terrace the land also. Otherwise, you create erosion. You know, you create. You need another crop in order to survive. Yeah, that's why I think culture and nature here will come together. Ecology adaptation is culture.
One just here in the, maybe that's the last one. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you so very much. Since you inspired us to think as a king, I have a rather big but very abstract question. And I've been thinking that actually, even though we tend to think of China as an industrial powerhouse, but actually cities such as Beijing, Tianjin, Shanghai are really post-industrial cities already. We've moved all of the cities into the surrounding countryside. So we are dealing with a situation whereby the majority of the population are actually living in post-industrial conditions. And in that sense, China today is not so different from America. And I wonder if you have an ultimate vision about where should we live. I'm very inspired by your idea that human beings are stupid. We've always picked the wrong places to live. Where the flood will come or on top we'll build houses on top of sinkholes and so on. But ultimately, Xi Jinping is trying to get people to move back to the countryside. And yet, most of your projects, if not all of your projects, are actually in new areas of old cities. So I'm just trying to think if you have a way to get us past the post-industrial present.
Post-industrial.
Get beyond the post-industrial.
Yeah, get beyond. I think you're right. I think this question is very serious. It's a way of how we urbanize, how we create a new civilization or lifestyle. I still think that we are in a wrong track to try to push immigrant, go to the city. Still, the government still try to urbanize, to put more, to encourage immigrants from the rural. So abandon the village is decaying, a third of the buildings empty. So actually right now we are thinking of to revitalize those villages, at least in some suburban area, at least in some area. The village will become revitalized or become best look for the future, the best location for the future. We have several tests right now. That's another subject. We try to create a new lifestyle in those villages, which is accessible because it's a speed train, because of the highway. So make those villages become a future ideal place for people to live, to work, to enjoy life, and it's particularly for aged people. That's why I think the urbanization in China is much being pushed. We make a mistake, and still making mistake. That's why I think we can avoid all those mistakes. For example, building over the floodplain. But because China is intellectually or professionally, we have 10 years of cultural revolution, which we have nobody been educated into do right planning, to right design, to right ecology. We still think, the American is the best model for urbanization, right? We still follow that Los Angeles model. We're still building highways as urban sprawl. Because we don't have enough people to get up to this top level to understand what mistake we have made here. We don't know Jane Jacob. It's a great success, and we don't know Mahag in 1970s. The first time I read in Mahag's book is the whole city only one copy, and the import of the book is controlled by the ministry. So you have to go into the particular place to read the book.
That's amazing.
Now, so there's a whole generation we're missing, to understand what is the good way to urbanize, to develop, to modernize the city. So I think we miss a big mistake. We miss a big opportunity. That's why right now, still China a long way to go. We have still maybe another several hundred million people go to the city, right? So that's why I think we need to take a revolutionary thinking. That's ecological thinking. Yeah.
Good way to end, I think. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So it's a